Rana Vig. I'm the president and CEO of Blue Lagoon Resources that trades on the CSE under the symbol BLLG and in the OTCQB as BLAGF.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's been a while. You been good?
I've been extremely good. I've been very, very busy and very excited because what I've been working on for 5 years, we finally achieved a couple months ago.
Yeah, but patience was required, was it not, in markets like this?
A lot of patience. It tested my patience, to be honest with you, but it's a crazy business. I don't know any business that you can. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been involved in many, many different industries over the span of my 40 plus years, and I've never been in an industry like this where you're not quite sure are you ever gonna get the permits to move forward or not. I mean, it's wild.
Well, that was the big move this year. Earlier, a couple of months ago, permits have come through rare as hen's teeth, aren't they, at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's very, very exciting, and we couldn't have hit the timing any better, right? I mean, the way the gold is going. When I founded this company in 2019, my idea behind it was that I had opportunities. I could have gone to copper, or I could have gone to, I looked at many, many different projects. But I'm Indian by birth, so we love gold, right? Everything I was reading on the macro scale, the macro picture, was telling me that gold has to move at some point. Now, this is back, when gold was around 1350. So I thought, man, it's going to get to 1800, 1900, 2000.
It's easy to forget that in today's environment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
different times.
Yeah.
Different
so
times.
We're very excited.
Okay, well, look, the thing I want to catch up with, obviously you saw the permit come through, and I think the market saw the permit come through. There's been a nice reaction out there, saying a high-priced gold environment, lovely. But the plan, the important thing is the plan. We've got a former producing property.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? What are you doing?
Well, look, the whole plan from the very beginning was, can I get something permitted? I looked at over 200 properties before I selected this one. And one of the key reasons I selected this one was it ticked that major point that I believed I could get this thing permitted. Now, I thought it was going to take me a year and a half, 2 years maximum, and it took me almost 5. That's the environment. And people are still congratulating me, by the way, because it's 5 years, because normally it takes like 20. Okay, but the plan has always been that to be in cash flow. So we're right there now. That we've spent close to $40 million on building the infrastructure, always with the mine ready.
What you've got before we get into the infrastructure, because I know you spent a fair bit of money and time on this. What did you first acquire, and and how have you moved that through to where you are today?
Well, we acquired this project. It's 22,000 hectares, right? So it's a fairly large property. It's just outside of the town of Smithers, which is a mining town, right? Many drilling companies are there. Government offices are there. It's a very substantial. There's a lot of infrastructure. Basically, the property is only less than an hour away from the town, so everybody comes home every night. So we acquired this high grade project. So the 22,000 hectares. There's 15 high-grade known veins there. Like Miranda was there back in the 80s and early 90s, and then they abandoned it, right, because of the prices of gold. But we know there's 15 at least high-grade known veins, and that's still only about 10% of the property. So all the focus has been on this little, tiny little area. So when we looked at all the historical data, we're very confident that this property could be advanced much further. Remember, this is averaging around 9 grams a ton, so it's high grade. So the plan from the very beginning was, acquire this, get it permitted, and advance it further. So since then, we've done more than 50,000 meters of drilling. That's over and above the historical. That gave us enough confidence to do 2 things. Number one, do we have a path to at least 1 million ounces? And we can clearly demonstrate that to anyone now that we have that on just the one vein. And then number 2, is there further blue sky on this? And a couple of years ago, in our final a bit of drilling that we did, we hit a new zone. So we have to still follow up on that. So what we acquired is basically now being justified by all the results that we've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years or so that we've had this property.
Okay, so you answer the first question is, can you get to 1 million ounces?
No.
On that one vein?
We're very confident we can demonstrate that on paper.
Okay. So how do you get after that? How do you, instead of telling me, show me that you're going to do that?
So by the way, on that 1 million ounces, you're familiar with Quinton Henney from Crescat. It took me 9 months to get his attention. because he kept saying, "Right, this is too small." And I said, "Quentin, just have a look at this." And you talk about patience. So no, I had to be patient there as well and respectfully, kind of keep after him. When he looked at it finally after a 90-minute technical call, you know what his last words were? "You boys have a hidden gem here." Right? Which is why they've invested and reinvested and reinvested, now almost at 10% of the cap table. So how are we going to go after it? Well, we have done this roughly 50,000 meters of drilling that demonstrate to us. If you look at our presentation, you'll see the resource, and then to the left of that slide, you'll see all the drilling that we've done next to the resource. It's all mineralized. So the plan now is take the free cash flow that we're about to generate and start to infill that, right? So when we infill that, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's gonna easily double or more of that resource. Then one of the things that people like Quentin asked us to do is, hey man, go deeper. So we did. We went 150 meters below the known resource, and guess what? We hit over 3 meters of more than almost 18 gram gold. So, and that was multiple hits. And as we go deeper, the copper is increasing. So that's getting everybody very excited. 1%, 2%, right? So it looks like we're getting closer and closer, to the source. So it's getting richer and richer, and who knows how much deeper this thing goes. So the plan basically is infill to increase the resource, so that everybody always says in this industry, well, show us more, show us more. Well, we are going to show you more, right? Again, you talk about patience. I've raised millions of dollars. I could have raised more money for this company a couple of years ago. But you know what? Everybody was depressed, as you know, right? The market was so depressed, companies were so beat up. Why dilute at that level? I'd be at 700, 800 million, 900 million shares. And unless your audience is all Australian who love those kind of numbers, the North Americans don't like that. So had to be patient. I tell my technical team, hey, one of the best things I like about this industry, the gold isn't going anywhere. It's been there for millions of years. Let's be patient. We've demonstrated, through drilling what we have. Let's now get the permit, and then go start infill and some of the deeper that I just talked about, some of the deeper drill holes, so that we increase that resource relatively easily.
Okay, well, there's the setup. And the idea here, it seems to me from reading your material, is we're going to be near-term revenue generators, which is unusual in mining, I have to say. But no other sector could get away with that for so long.
But even near term, what does that mean? We're talking about weeks and months here. We're July 9th is our official opening.
So that's what you're going with?
July 9th is our official opening. You should come.
Okay. So what the opening means? What?
Opening means, come on, man, it's been 5 years. Opening
we're
means
going to open, but
we get to cut a ribbon, we get to celebrate a little bit, right?
Right.
We get to pause for just one day,
okay,
and then we start. So what it means, joking aside, what it means is that we're going to start working immediately underground. We'll probably start with a little bit of pre-development for 5 or 6 weeks, but just to open up more faces. One of the things that I have talked to my advisors and my consultants and my team about is, hey guys, this is what's keeping me up at night is, I like to mitigate as much risk as de-risk as much as possible, right? My training is very conservative. What can go wrong here, guys? And they said, look, we've got a very solid mine plan, but if you gave us another 5 or 6 weeks and about $1 million, we'd like to open up a couple more faces. And I said, you got it. So we're going to start from there, and that way we'll have multiple faces to work with. So if something gets delayed over here, we can go and work over here. Right. One of the things I've impressed upon them is keep the cash flow going.
Yeah. Talk to me about the teams that you've got on board. Well, how are you doing that? Are you using consultants? Are you hiring external teams, and how are you managing costs?
I mean, a combination of both, right? I love consultants because, I don't have to pay all sorts of benefits and various things. If they're competent, why not? Let it be, their headache, some of these things. And that's what we've done. So, our mining, the team who's going to actually mine, Cobra Mining, he's one of the best miners in the country. Very, very extremely experienced. The interesting thing is he was actually, as a young man, worked in this very same mine back in the Noranda days. So he's very familiar with the underground. That helps. It also helps he lives right in Smithers, right? So that he doesn't have to fly in, etc. So that's very important. And then we have Steve Cutler from Roughstock Mining out of Montana. They are one of the consultants and one of the miners at Stillwater. So they're very, very experienced in narrow vein mining. right? And he's very familiar, with this project. And then I brought in some other people. You may know of Yanis Sitos, who's a former BHP. He was at Gold Source that he took from 200,000 ounces to 2 million and sold to Jamaica. So success, the story there. Peter Bojos, who's been involved in 80 countries, over 20 mine openings and reopenings. These are the kind of the brain trust that I've surrounded myself with, so that these are people who've already been there, done that, and they're showing me things that I can avoid to keep my costs down and make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that they've already seen happen.
Okay, let's look at some of the money that you spent to date. Okay, we're opening soon. You're going to open up some of these additional faces, etc. Like, how are you going to get after it in terms of the equipment that you're going to need? The facilities above the ground and below the ground are going to be important. So is all that ready to go?
Yeah. So most of the our equipment that we need ourselves is already there.
Okay.
We'll upgrade some as cash flow comes. Our teams keeps telling me, hey, we should upgrade the generators. So so we'll do that. But the rest is contract mining, right? So he's got the equipment. Cobra's got the equipment. Yeah, keep it lean. Hey, listen, as I said, man, I'm Indian. I'm cheap. Okay, I watch every penny. Every penny, has to be watched, and you got to spend wisely. So we have everything that we need to get going here.
So is this a case of like start small, but the potential's there? Because when I look at these, we can projected ounces. It's small, but I guess perfectly formed, you'd call it. But how do you grow that?
Well, look, what is small? I mean, to you, if we can generate, let's say, I don't know, $20 million. Is that small? I'm talking, what's cash flow?
It depends if you have to put it straight back in the ground. Yeah.
Well, okay, it's a good point. But I do want to put it back into the ground. Okay, now how much of that we'll see, because I want to do infill so I can increase. Currently, we have a resource of 218,000 ounces in the measured indicated.
Yeah.
Right. Well, how do I grow that now to 418, 518 million ounces? Well, I got to infill that to do that. That's going to require some money. So I have two options. I can take the hat and go around again, right? Or I can take my Blue Lagoon card, and I can walk up to the portal and like an ATM and just withdraw, right? That's what I see this as. This is like an ATM for me, right? Every month we ship the ore. We ship the ore to Nikola, with our toll mill partner, and in less than 30 days, a check arrives, right? Now, how do we know that? Well, we just did that 2 years ago. We sent them 5,000 tons as a test, right? They reconfirmed 9 grams a ton of gold, and they reconfirmed 95% recovery. And I got checks every couple of weeks.
Right. So I guess what I'm building towards is I understand that concept. I like that concept in a way that's kind of it's anti-dilutory, right? Which is what you're aiming for, because it's cheaper than going with your hat and a begging bowl. But to what end? Because ultimately I'm interested in margin.
Yes.
I'm interested in free cash flow.
Yes.
And I'm interested in all the good things that having a big bank balance, not that balance sheet, but actual bank balance means for a company. So how do you get there? And what's the kind of time frame? And how do we do that?
Well, how you get there is simple. You have to have the goods, which we believe we have, right? So we have to have the ounces in the ground that we can extract and then we can sell, so we can get the cash. Well, we clearly have that, and we're going to demonstrate that here shortly. What happens after that is really going to be determined in a few months from now, kind of 12 to 18 months. I already have conversations going on with companies, right, who are looking at us and saying, hey, this is interesting. Remember, there are a lot of companies out there, there are exploration companies that have very good projects, but they don't have the capital. It's very difficult to raise capital. So I already have conversations going on, and I'm saying, well, hold on, we'll see. When we have cash in the bank, right, that puts us in a tremendous position of strength. So what are we going to do? Well, it's going to have to be a kind of a game day decision, right? We're going to evaluate. As a business person, I evaluate everything that is presented to me. So we'll see how it goes. We'll take some money and we'll put it in infill. We'll take some money and we'll put it into the new discovery that we had a couple of years ago and follow that up. We'll take some money and look at the extension of this vein, which appears clear. And then I might even take some money and do an issuer bid to support the stock, right? And we'll see how much cash do we get. Listen, the way things are happening in the world, gold is certainly biting at 3,500 and heading towards possibly 4,000. We're not counting on that, right? Our base case is based on 2,600 gold, okay? If we can do 2,600 gold, we're gonna do fine. But what if it goes nuts? So you have to decide that those things as the time goes. So in 12 to 18 months, I'm in a better position to answer that question. And if you invite me back, what are we gonna do? but there's going to be M&A opportunities? Do we acquire? Do we merge? Number of conversations are already taking place because we're already on people's radars.
Right. So first steps first, get this thing into
When I
production.
get this thing
What's the
moving,
timeline look like?
We're starting July 9th is the opening, and we're starting
That's
immediately.
ribbon cutting, but when do we kind of get into the meat of it?
The first sort of 2-3 months will be, kind of
Setting up,
pre-development,
yeah.
getting things moving.
Yeah.
We fully expect. Cash flow will start as early as this fall, and free cash flow we expect to be early by the end of this year, before the end of this year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not too many of those stories around. I like that.
I like the smile on my face, and it keeps growing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think we talk about patience, but it's also a wait and see game in terms of how the market is evolving. And we mentioned Mr. Trump on a daily basis on this show and his executive orders. The intent down in the US is clear for all. So, what are you seeing in Canada? Mr. Carney made some good speeches and said a few things.
Yeah.
But what's the reality of this whole Canadian infrastructure and self-sufficiency for miners like yourself?
Well, I think it's great talk, and no disrespect to the Prime Minister, but politicians tend to say a lot of things, right? They want to fast track projects and all this, and that's fantastic. I think the industry needs that, right?
Yeah.
We have to have these things. They can't take years and years to get permit.
You've been through a permit process which looked like that did, right? So what more do you need from the government, provincial or federal?
Well, I think we need a shake-up from the bottom up. I think they have to look at how these things are evaluated. The amount of red tape, the amount of regulation, it's not a practical approach. That's what I found. There were so many incidents with the people with the ministry people that we're dealing with that we thought were really impractical. Part of the problem, at least in British Columbia, is there's no more small mines office. So we're a small operation to start with, but they treat us like we're barrack, right? They because there's only one office,
Yeah.
right? So they really have to take a look at that. The staffing is a problem. We went through several, it's like 6 or 7 people
Yeah.
during our period who were the lead sort of on our file.
Yeah.
So every time there's a new learning curve. So there's a lack of staffing. All these things have to change if they're really serious about it, and we'll see if that.
And what have those sort of incremental or incidentals in terms of cost meant for companies like yourself over the past 4 or 5 years? Because we've seen obviously a huge increase in the kind of ESG compliance and paper, etc. The kind of cost of being on the exchange. Quite frankly, the cost of the mining itself. Obviously, we've seen an inflationary environment during there, but even so, costs have kind of crept, and companies are spending more money surviving than they are doing, if you know what I mean.
It's huge. The cost of my original budgets for the application were a fraction of where we ended up with, because every time that we submitted something, one of the things that they've done is just about every piece of paper you submit to them requires a QP stamp, some qualified individual, and that caused 2 issues. Number one, these QPs are somewhat limited for the job, the task that were at hand. So timeline became an issue. So everything we needed something, it's going to be 7 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks just to get that stamp. Number 2, of course, they're expensive. Yeah. Right. So a lot of these things were necessary, but the government, I believe, is doing that because they want to protect themselves, and they're saying, "Look, you believe this? Go get some qualified person to say this is good." Right? Even though our own staff or our consultants are qualified, but they may not have that designated stamp. Or if we're using somebody in the U.S., they may not have the Canadian designation. But that doesn't mean you disqualify what their abilities are.
Yeah.
So all of these things I think have to take a look at in order to be practical, in order to move forward.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same page. I don't think it's a case of we want to kind of skip a few phases. What the companies are being asked is reasonable, but the red tape, the cost, the time frame, and time is money for us because we've got fixed costs which don't change if nothing's happening. Yeah. Really needs a kind of a rethink in the sector.
The only silver lining, or maybe I should say gold lining, for us is that the delay actually worked in our favor, because back then the goal was 1350. Now we're talking at 3300. So maybe that's a positive.
Luck and timing.
Yeah,
that's what we want in this game. Well, look, Rana, I appreciate you coming in, giving us a catch up on the story. It seems like you're going to move into quite an interesting group of companies able to talk a revenue game relatively soon. So
That's right.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.